Thanks for joining me again for episode 2. I've got some bad news and some good news. The bad news is my Sony Handycam went down, and I replaced it with this cheap one off of Amazon, and the quality is just horrible, so I'm returning it, and I'm getting another Sony. So half of this footage is going to be a little blurry, but I switch over to my iPhone about halfway through, and now things start looking better. Well, the good news is that my new videos are going to be looking and sounding better than the old ones, because this is the new improved version of the Sony Handycam, and I got it from Sweetwater, and it should be here soon, and I'm going to be filming I've got plenty of stuff I can film. Now in this build, I think what happened was they sprayed it and then they started polishing, and they used the color tone medium compound, which is like a jamming toothpaste down in the cracks between the binding and the rosewood. I'm going to pick that out of there and fill it in with this grain filler. This is the medium brown rosewood. But first, I'm going to get the chalky stuff out, and I'm going to pick it out with this X-Acto blade, and also use a little naphtha on a toothbrush. Seems to dissolve it pretty good. Looking a little closer at it, it looks like some of these gaps are more like trenches. They're pretty deep. And I think what I'm probably going to do is pack in some liquid hide glue and let it set overnight, and then come back in the next day with the grain filler. So if you haven't seen it yet, this is the proper guitar workstation and the crossover mini from Total Vice. I've also got the crossover, what they call the pedestal, the swing arm pedestal. It's very nice. You can hold your guitar in any position needed. I'm actually working on one right now where I'm fixing a huge gash in the bottom of a guitar that I was able to hold the guitar completely upside down, kind of, with the headstock facing the ground, so I could comfortably work on the bottom of the guitar, which actually I used on this guitar too. So liquid hide glue, not the best glue for hold a strong joint, but it's good for filling voids and cracks and gaps and things. It does take 24 hours to harden, and some of it evaporates a little bit, so I'll pack it in, wipe it up with a wet paper towel, and clean it up. Hopefully most of these gaps will be gone tomorrow, and I'll put in my grain filler, and then I'll take it down for some more spraying. But before I get the spray gun out, I'm going to reshape the neck, because that is going to, in effect, take all the finish off the neck. So we're going to be doing a little neck refinishing here in a few minutes. But first I want to just get this footage out of the way. Now I'm changing the neck profile with my coarse rasp. I believe that these necks are just kind of roughed in, and then the builder is supposed to do this final shaping at home, to his preference of shape. They leave enough material on here where you could do a V-shaped neck if you like. You can do a C. You could almost probably do a D-shaped neck. There's so much material over here on the shoulders of the neck, over by the fretboard. I kind of like it where it's asymmetrical from bass to treble. I like a little less material on the side where my thumb is, because I'm a kind of thumb wraparound kind of player. Everything goes back to the way I started playing guitar as a teenager, watching Eddie Van Halen and wrapping my thumb around. I know Randy Rhoads was probably more of a thumb on the back of the neck guy. He was also like even a bigger inspiration. But switching back and forth from the StewMac fine rasp and my coarse cheap one. I would like to eventually get the StewMac coarse with a double radiused shape. But I did get one new tool from StewMac recently. It's the gooseneck scraper. This one here is just a regular cabinet card scraper. It's nice. I'm taking off the rest of the finish. Since I'm going to be spraying a new finish on here, I didn't want that stripe down the middle, even though I'm leaving most of the material on the middle of it. I'm going to end up sanding it all and spraying a new finish. When I originally priced the job out, I just told him I was going to wipe on a French polish finish. That was before I realized that it already had a lacquer finish on it. I thought maybe it was a polyurethane because it looked so bad. But it is lacquer. And it was just a thin coat of lacquer. But the reason it really looked so bad is that the pores. Whenever you have like a high sheen finish over a bumpy porous surface like that, it just looks god awful. It would have been better for him just to spray a satin finish and just, say, hey, okay, we're done with it. No polishing. Because once they brought it to a gloss, it just really amplified all those little pits. All right, switched over to the 3M 320 grit free cut sandpaper. Or is that the 220? Yeah, 220 and then 320. And then I'm going to do a pore filler on this neck. Vacuum up the dust. Feel it. There's a little bump down the middle that I couldn't see, but I could definitely feel it. So, back at it with the rasp. Okay, shaping a neck doesn't have to be a completely final thing. We could shape it now, put the strings on it, and decide that we want to do a little more shaping later. That's completely acceptable. Actually, this isn't my first time scraping or shaving a neck. Here's the gooseneck scraper. I love that. It has a multitude of radiuses as you turn it around. Yeah, I bought a Gibson before I went pro with this stuff, and it had this big fat 70s neck profile. I couldn't even play it. It was so thick. It was like 1 1/8 at the 12th fret thick. So I went ahead and reshaped that neck, took the finish off it. It was a Gibson SG, and I didn't even take the strings off. I reshaped it, got it down to bare wood. I ended up refinishing it black. It was a black guitar, so it didn't take a lot of thought, but I refinished it without even ever taking the strings off it, and it came out great. I asked a local luthier if he could do it for me before I went ahead and tried it for myself. Right here I'm chatting with Ian Davlin. I like to check in with him every now and then. Next, I'm going to use the grain filler to brush it on into the gaps and the trenches. Brush it in. Let it dry for a bit. Brush in a little more. Scrape it off. So this Propper's guitar workstation is so nice. And I'll show you why. Right here I'm working on the treble side, binding. I turn that crank and I can flip the guitar and work on the bass side. Lock it in place. Kind of scrape off that grain filler that I put on about 3-4 minutes ago. And then flip it back over to the treble side, and after it dries, and do the same. You could even work on the bottom of the guitar like this, like I was saying earlier. Hold it secure. I didn't want the rosewood grain filler to permanently stain the white binding, so I'm just going to scrape off a little bit of the binding surface where I'm noticing some file marks and things that were left during the build. Should have been done prior, but to finishing or spraying, that's what I was going to say. I'm going to get this smooth enough where I can take it on down and start spraying a finish over top. So this is the next day. I started the video like 2 days ago. So you have to be patient with some of this stuff. You can only work on it for an hour or so, and then you gotta wait a day and then work on it for another hour the next day. Then what I'm going to do next is sand it all, kind of rough up the lacquer, and with 320 grit, just give it a little tooth so my new finish really bonds with the old, make a chemical bond. I also put some of that rosewood grain filler in on the neck. I'm going to be sanding that with 320 first before I spray. I also like to spray my first coat with just straight lacquer retarder to kind of soften up the old lacquer. And then I follow right behind it with some build coats of lacquer. We'll switch over to the footage from the garage here in a sec. Should turn out pretty good. I'm gonna spray the peg head face black. Right now it's sort of an ebony color. I've gotten started on spraying. This is just one thin coat of lacquer. And you can already tell it looks a lot better. Still got the pores. Remember this one I did 9 coats. I'm gonna wet sand the face and do a satin top coat on the face. But the one thing I wanted to show you guys is that it became obvious after the first mist coat that they had sprayed some vintage amber on top, and I sanded it off. So I'm gonna need to, before I go any further with these top coats, is I've got vintage amber right here from StewMac, and I'm gonna shoot a quick coat of that on this neck, see how it looks. So I'm gonna put the camera down and spray that real quick. All right, there's after a coat of vintage amber, and I can see that it's not brown enough. So I've got a couple browns here. I'm gonna mix them into the lacquer. I'm thinking golden brown. Yeah, I'm gonna go with golden brown, and if that's not dark enough, I'll try the Kalamazoo mahogany, which is a more reddish brown. But I'm gonna spray on the golden brown, let you look and see what that looks like. Here we go. Now this is not the golden brown amber mixture that I was talking about earlier. I shot that and I didn't film the results. I just thought I gotta redo this. It was still too yellow. So believe it or not, what I ended up doing was I mixed Kalamazoo brown or Kalamazoo mahogany color tone with cherry red, because to me it looked like it was what the original stain was, kind of an orange color, and that cherry red will get you an orange if you mix it with a yellow. So the vintage amber I sprayed on there was kind of yellow, so I figured that should work for me. Now this is just a really good example of how you can adjust the color after, you know, the fact. My other option was to just take all the color off, completely off to the top, but I was already in the middle of it all, so I decided to do that. And just so you know what about how dark that looked, it was a ½ ounce of lacquer, and it was 7 drops of Kalamazoo. Here, I'll put it on the white surface, you'll see it better. It was 7 drops of the Kalamazoo mahogany and 4 drops of cherry red. And I'll be darned. Here's a look at the peg head after filling the grain, spraying it black, and then putting on 2 coats of clear. It still needs some sanding and probably a little pore filling. But the back of the neck looks great. I'm going to leave that be. And I'm going to hang it up here for this week. We'll see you next week. Thanks for sticking around. We'll catch you later.